Masechet Ketubot, Daf Non Zayin. We're about to see a machloket about a machloket about a machloket. We're dealing with the machloket we saw yesterday between Rabbi Yosef, who says that a man can make a stipulation regarding the ketubah verbally, and the condition will stick. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot make a verbal condition; it has to be written. So Rabbi Yosef says, yes, you can change something verbally. Rabbi Yosef says you cannot change something verbally. We want to know at when are they talking about? Do they have a machloket all the time? From the beginning of the chuppah till the end of bi'ah, all that is the duration of the weddings of the wedding, from the beginning till the consummation. So does the machloket apply during that entire period? Only part of it. So we see it only applies to part of it, but which part? So here, Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi mishum bar kapara. So Rav Dimi, who came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, reported the following in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. It says, Machloket betechila aval basof divrei hakol enam ochelet. He says the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef is only at the beginning. We're going to see what the beginning means. Beginning of what? It doesn't say. So beginning of the chuppah, beginning of bi'ah, let's say beginning of chuppah. Okay, the machlok is only at the beginning, but at the end stage, whenever that is we'll define that. Everyone agrees she cannot forego those rights. In other words, it cannot be done verbally. There's no more. You can't change anymore because then it's already by the towards the end where it gets more serious. Okay, that is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yochanan Amar ben bezo machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says that the Tanaim, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef, disagree throughout the entire time period, all the way from the beginning, even at the end. So it looks like there's a machloket between Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. However, Amar Rabbi Abu, l'dedim mefasheli mined Rabbi Yochanan, da'ana ve'Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi la palgina nadeh. But Rabbi Abu says, Rabbi Yochanan told me that there actually is no machloket between himself, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rather, they're just using different terminology. Mai betechila deka amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi techilat chuppah, or mai sof bi'ah. When Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was talking about the beginning, he meant the beginning of chuppah. So we can look at our chart here. According to Rav Dimi, at the beginning of the chuppah, that's when we have a machloket, and Rabbi Yosef says you can make a change. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot make a change. Whereas end means after bi'ah, then everyone agrees you cannot make a change. Fine, that's what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said in his language. But we're going to see Rabbi Yochanan actually said the same thing. Even though Rabbi Yochanan says from beginning to end, no change, right? That was, he said, Rabbi Yochanan ben bezo machloket. Sorry, Rabbi Yochanan says, from beginning to end, there is a machloket, but what does he mean by those words? V'chika amina ana ben bezo machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says, when I said that throughout the process there is machloket applies, betechilat chuppah v'sof chuppah tehi techilat bi'ah. I meant the beginning and end of the chuppah, and the end of the chuppah is the beginning of bi'ah. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he says the machloket applies from beginning to end. But that just means beginning to end of the chuppah ceremony. That's when there's machloket. But after the end of the chuppah, then there's no machloket. Everyone agrees you cannot change anymore. Even Rabbi Yosef would agree. Rav Dimi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was saying the very same thing. He just said beginning, meaning the chuppah, that's the whole chuppah, and end means bi'ah. And so you can make a change, according to Rabbi Yosef, during the chuppah, but he agrees you cannot make a change afterwards. So actually, there's no machloket between Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. They both are just using different terminology. All that is Rav Dimi's version. But we're about to see Ravin, who was also one of the travelers, has another version of this tradition. Ki ata Rabin amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Shimon ben Pazi amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi mishum bar kapara machloket lebasof ava betechila divrei hakol mochelet. So in this version is more lenient and says that the machloket, the controversy between the Tanaim, is only at the end. End of what? We'll see. But in the beginning, everyone agrees that she can forego. Yes, he can make a condition, and the condition will apply. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree. So he says something about, according to Ravin, beginning of chuppah, all say one can change. Fine. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Amar ben bezo machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says, throughout the entire period is a machloket. Now, it looks like they are disagreeing, but once again, Amar Rabbi Abu L'didi mefashali mined Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abu says, Rabbi Yochanan himself told me that we have no substantive machloket. We're just using our words differently. We have different definitions of what beginning and end mean. When Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says end, what does that mean? Sof chuppah. Techilat chuppah. That was all within the chuppah. I said, from beginning to end there's a machloket, techilat bi'ah vesof bi'ah. I was talking about beginning and end of bi'ah. So let's see here. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said that at the beginning, meaning the chuppah, everyone agrees you can change. So this is, the whole thing is shifted over one step more lenient. And end is machloket. The end of chuppah, that means during the whole bi'ah process, that's when there is a machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says from beginning to end there's a machloket. He meant from beginning to end of bi'ah. So beginning to end of bi'ah is the same as saying end of chuppah. Because right after the chuppah, then is the process of bi'ah. So actually, that's just a semantic argument, and really substantively, they all agree. Okay, so we do have a machloket, therefore, between Rav Dimi and Ravin about how Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi interpret the machloket of Tanaim. But, so there's three levels, right? The Tanaitic level, early Amoraim, and these late Amoraim. The early Amoraim, certainly you have a machloket about whether you can change or not. Where does it apply? Well, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi agree on how to interpret the Tanaim. The thing is that Rav Dimi and Ravin have two different versions about what Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, those two early Amoraim agree, but we're not sure what they agree on. And that's subject to the machloket at the third level, at the latest level. Okay, now we're not done yet. Amar Papa, ilav da Amar Rabbi Abhu, l'didi mefashali mineh, de Rabbi Yochanan da Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi la palgina hadadeh. But Papa says, if not that Rabbi Abhu told us that he himself heard from Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi do not have a machloket. If I didn't know that from Rabbi Abu, Hava Amina, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi pelige, v'Rab Dimi v'Rabin la pelige. I would have interpreted all these words in a different way to get to the end result that the early Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, are arguing on each other, and Rav Dimi and Ravin are not arguing on each other. And I would explain the words such that I would have the third level machloket not be a machloket, rather than the second one. Why would he do that? We'll see in a second. How he does that, he would do it as follows. My sof de kamar Ravin, sof chuppah. My techilat de kamar Rav Dimi, techilat bi'ah. When Ravin said end, he meant the end of chuppah, which is what he says. So in other words, the machloket is at the end of the chuppah. That means during bi'ah. So the machloket is during bi'ah. That's how I would have explained Ravin, which is how we explained it anyway. But he would have explained it Rav Dimi differently than the way we explained it. He would have said that when Rav Dimi says beginning, that means beginning of bi'ah. So that the beginning, when is there a machloket? At the beginning. Beginning of what? Not beginning of chuppah as we interpreted earlier, but rather beginning of bi'ah. That's when there is a machloket. And if you interpret it Rav Dimi that way, then beginning of bi'ah there's machloket. That's the same as Ravin who says end of chuppah machloket. End of chuppah and beginning of bi'ah are the same. And that way, there would have been a machloket between Yoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, according to that interpretation. In other words, all that would have been just for Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So there would have been a machloket at the second level, but no machloket at the third level. That's what Papa says. Now, Maika Mashmalan, why is Papa telling us this? We know from Rabbi Abu, we trust his tradition, and heard it from Rabbi Yochanan that that's what they meant. So why is what is Papa teaching us in saying that he, if he didn't know that, would have preferred there to be a machloket at the second level and not the third level? He's going to actually teach them something very important. That we would prefer that two Amoraim would have a machloket about their own reasoning. Everyone has different reasoning, different understanding of a text or what the issues are and what's important and when exactly during the marriage ceremony do we consider that the marriage takes effect and becomes more serious to such an extent that the man is already decided to what to give and cannot make a change, right? When can you make a condition, the nature of conditions, the nature of marriage at each step. We understand that people will have different understandings and reasoning, and there could be a machloket at that second level. But we prefer never to have a machloket between two Amoraim about what a previous Amorah said, because that's simply a machloket about facts. And a controversy about facts means that one is right and one is wrong. If they don't know what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, and Avdimi says, I think he said that, Avin says, I think he said that, one's right, one's wrong. Someone heard correctly, someone misheard, got a wrong tradition. And in that case, you can't say Elu va'elu divrei Elokim hayim because it's just a fact. One's right, one's wrong. And so Rav Papa is saying that if not for Rabbi Abhu, I would have preferred to know that Rav Dimi and Ravin were reporting the same thing. Right? They both came from Israel, and they both reported in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says. They just use different language. Even though Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan have a machloket about where to apply the machloket Tanaim, but that is a substantive machloket about reasoning, and both of those can have truth value, because that's totally fine. They're not arguing about facts, but they're arguing about issues. But since Rabbi Abhu did in fact say there's a machloket since Rabbi Abhu did say that there's no machloket at the second level, the only way to understand there's no machloket at the second level is to say that there is a machloket on the third level. So sometimes, what can we do? Sometimes there is a machloket even about what an Amorah actually said. The next Mishnah talks about the timing of the wedding. Usually people would do kiddushin and write a ketubah, and then they may wait several weeks or several months before the nisuin. If they set an exact date for the nisuin, then they have to get married on that date. If not, there are penalties for whichever side is delaying. If they do not set a fixed date, what's the maximum that they can delay? That's our Mishnah. Notnin libtula shenem asar chodesh mi sheteva'ah ha'ba'al lefanes et asma. We give for a bitula. Bitula has a lot of things to prepare for. It's her first time marriage, so she's got to get everything ready and build a new house and all that. Get the wedding preparation. So we give her 12 months from the time that the husband asks her for her hand in marriage, which would be like an unofficial engagement that we call today, so that she can prepare herself. And so too, we also give him the same amount of time. From the time that they both agreed to get married, they have 12 months. If 12 months should come, and she says, well, I'm still not ready, then her ketubah will be reduced. On the other hand, if the 12 months comes and she says, okay, I'm ready, and he's still not, and he delays further, then he will have to pay more for the ketubah. So these are all financial considerations. Well, almana sheloshim yom. However, if it's her second marriage, then she only requires 30 days, because she already prepared once for it, so the second time around is easier to prepare. If the time comes and they still didn't get married, then she has a right to eat from his food. The ketubah says he has to provide for her sustenance, and while they're engaged, she's still living in her father's house. But once, whatever time it is, the time that they set, or the maximum 12 months, or maximum 30 days for an almanah, so at that point, he is responsible to feed her. And if he is a kohen and she is not, then he can give her tirumah. She can start eating tirumah. We're going to see more about that. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Notnina hakol teruma. If he is, whenever the man is providing for his fiancée wife, he can pay her all in teruma. Now, even though she can only eat teruma when she's tehora, which means whenever she's teme'ah, which is for sure going to be nida, and other times she won't be able to eat that teruma. So that means she won't be. It's a bit of a problem. But it's okay because she can always sell the teruma to a kohen, take the money, and with the money buy food. So it's fine. Rabbi Akiva, however, demands that the husband provide for her half with regular chulin food and half with teruma food. That way, at least half the time she's going to be, around half the time she's for sure going to be teme'ah, and therefore she'll eat the chulin and the rest teruma. So that makes it easier for her that she doesn't have to go and sell it to buy food. Hayavam eno ma'achil b'teruma. Yavam, while a woman is waiting for yibum, as she's not yet married, so that means her husband died, and so now she is shomeret yavam. The yavam does not, she will not eat teruma while waiting for the yavam. Asta shisha chodashim b'fnei habal, v'shisha chodashim b'fnei hayavam. And so if a woman is engaged to be married, and so she waited 6 months, right, so she had a year, she's a betula, so he has a year to wait. She waits 6 months and he dies. And then she's waiting for the yavam another 6 months. That does not add up to a year, because it's a year waiting for one person, not for a combination of two. And even if she was waiting to get married to her husband for 1 year minus 1 day, and then she fell to the yavam. That's not a full year. So the yavam does not complete that year. He can wait more time. Or kulan b'fnei yavam chaser yom echad b'fnei haba'al, or the other way around, that she was waiting for the husband for 1 day, and then she fell to yibum, and the 12 months minus that 1 day comes up. The yavam also still does not provide teruma, and now chelit b'teruma. That whole time she does not eat teruma. So theoretically, it can be up to 2 years minus 2 days if the original husband dies 1 day before the full year, and then she falls to the yavam and stays with him for another 1 year less 1 day. She will not have access to teruma that entire time. Zo Mishnah Rishona, everything we said above is the original law, that once the time comes for the wedding, even if the wedding didn't happen yet, he has to provide for her and he can give her teruma. Bet din shalacha acharehen amru. However, a bet din later on changed the law and said, En ha'isha ochelet b'teruma ad shetikanes lachupa. A woman does not eat teruma until the actual marriage. We'll see the reason is because if she's still living in her father's house, and she gets a delivery of teruma, she's eating that teruma in her father's house, so then her siblings, her parents are like, oh, that looks good, and they're going to eat from it, which is a problem. So it's not a protected area, because people are used to sharing food in one house. So therefore, it's not until she physically leaves her father's house and goes to her husband, then, which is at the wedding, then only then can she start eating teruma. Even though from the letter of the law, the original law was that she deserves to be able to eat teruma from beforehand. Okay, from whenever the husband is required to give her sustenance, he can also give her teruma. All right, minahane mileh. What's the origin that for a betula, she and he have 12 months to prepare before they are required to get married? Amar Rav Chisda Amar Kera Vayomer Achi Habeima Tesheba Na'ara Itanu Yamim O Asor. Regarding Rivka, when Eved Avraham goes and finds Rivka, and then he goes and meets Rivka's brother and mother, and they're negotiating because the brother and mother want her to stay a little while longer, whereas Eved Avraham wants to take him away immediately. To go back to Avraham and to meet Yitzchak and marry him. So the Rivka's brother and mother say, let her stay here, says Yamim, days or 10 days. Now, what does it mean, days or 10 days? Usually, whenever we have a plural, we assume it's the minimum plural, which is 2. So if that means 2, does a person speak like that? Well, this is not a good negotiating tactic. First you think the brother and mother said, well, let her stay 2 days. And then he said, no, 2 days is too long. And then they said 10 days. That doesn't make sense, right? They would be compromising for less time, not for more time. Unless we use this tactic sometime for our kids. If you say, you're going to go, you have to go to sleep at 8 o'clock. And they say, no. Okay, fine. You said no. Now it's going to have to be now it's going to have to be earlier, 7 o'clock, right? Because you said no. But that's not what's going on here. So it doesn't make sense to go from a lower amount to a bigger amount. Amru le tereyome, amar lehula, amru le asarayome. So it doesn't make sense that they said, let her stay 2 more days. Eved Abraham says, no, that's too long. And they said, okay, fine, 10 days. No, it has to become less. Rather, the word yamim, although sometimes it can mean days, it can also mean a year. Where do we see that? In this pasuk in Vayikra that says if a person sells a dwelling in a walled city, so he can redeem it until 1 year after the sale. Yamim tiyeh geulato. So we know that yamim here means 1 year because it's explicit. That says shenat mimkaro. That's the time period. Yamim means 1 year. So to here, it means yamim or asod. First, the Rivka's family said, let her stay for 1 year. And then Yitzchak says, no, Eved Avraham says, no, impossible. And they say, okay, fine, how about 10 days? All right, so that's the source, that 1 year is the standard amount. In that case, they didn't wait a year, but we do learn from there that a standard amount that is appropriate to ask for someone to wait before the marriage is in fact 1 year. Now, ve'ema chodesh, how do you know yamim means a year? Maybe it means a month. Tichtiv ad chodesh yamim. When this is regarding the slav meat that came down, and Moshe says, "You want meat? I'm going to have it up to a month." And it says chodesh, and it says the word yamim. So yamim can mean a month. Amri, the answer to that is Danin yamim setam yamim setam, and Danin yamim setam yamim shenemar behen chodesh. If you have the word yamim by itself, which you have here in Bereshit and in Vayikra, that makes sense. That's a year. Whereas the one chodesh yamim is not yamim by itself, but has a modifier, and so that's not as good as an option as the one from Vayikra, which means it's 1 year. All right, that's our source. Now, Amar Bizera Tana Ketana. Ben avia yecholin le'akeb. So we have a baraita that says if a girl is a minor, she's under 12, then if she is not ready, or if the father is not ready to marry off his daughter, they can wait even more than a year until she grows up. So if she's 8 and she's not ready, then the guy has to wait until she is 12. So even longer. Okay, that's the braita. Let's analyze it. Bishlama'ihi maseh me'akeva. Makes sense that she should be able to wait because she knows herself and she says, "I'm not ready. I'm still a kid. Still, playing with dolls, and I'm not ready to be married." So she can wait. El aviha ihi nichala aviha ma'nafka lemina. But why would the father wait if the girl's okay with it? Then what difference does it make to the father? The father, I guess, would usually want to know that his daughter is taken care of and someone is providing for her. So if she's ready, then why would a father not be ready? What does that have to do with him? The answer is the father is worried for his daughter. Maybe right now she doesn't know. She says she's ready, but she's a little kid. She doesn't know what she's getting into. And now she's going to go married. Tomorrow she's going to not like it, and she's going to be a rebellious wife. She's not going to fulfill her proper duties, and she's going to end up being divorced. And where's she going to go when she gets divorced? Back to me, back to the father. And so he wants to make sure, that's his responsibility, to make sure that even though his daughter says she's ready, the father will also chime in to make sure that he too is confident that she is ready. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Levi, en poskin ala ketana lahasi'a keshehi ketana. Rabbi Abba bar Levi said that we do not make a finalize an agreement when a girl is a minor to marry her off. But when you can make a final agreement, even while she's a minor, as long as the wedding is set for when she will grow up. In other words, the final agreement is not binding if the agreement is that she is going to get married while she's still a ketana, because she may change her mind, she may delay, so it's not a binding agreement unless the wedding is set for when she is a gedolah. Pishita, we say, isn't this obvious? Right? That's basically what we just said before. We might have thought that if she has to agree from when she's a minor, she's already going to be afraid and she's going to continue to be weak in her commitment even when she becomes an adult. So we might have thought that any agreement while she is a ketana is not binding. And therefore, the B'rayta has to come teach that the agreement while she's a ketana is binding as long as the wedding will be when she's an adult. So even though she had agreed to it beforehand, when she's an adult, she will not be afraid and she'll know what she's getting into and she'll be fully committed. Amar Rav Huna, Bagra yom echad v'nit kadesha, notnin la sheloshim yom ke'almana. Rav Huna teaches that if a girl becomes a bogeret, meaning 12 and a half, and then one day, and then she becomes mikudeshet, she does not get 12 months from that time to prepare for the wedding, but rather only 30 days, the same as an almanah. The reasoning seems to be that by time a girl is that age, she probably has already been preparing for a wedding. Right? What else would she be doing? And therefore, since she's so old, she's like an old maid already, 12 and a half, so she must have prepared already her dress and jewelry and mentally prepared whatever else she had to do, and therefore she only gets 30 days. Okay, that's Rav Huna's statement. We are going to challenge it 3 times. The third one will be a successful challenge. Me'tibe, the first one, from a B'rayta, Bagra, harehi Ketubot. When a girl becomes an adult, 12 and a half, that is like the time when she is proposed and agrees to marriage. Now, what does that mean? My love, Ketubot de betula. Isn't that mean the same as a betula, who's a minor, who gets asked in marriage and has 12 months? So isn't it saying that she has 12 months? And I said, no, la Ketubot almanah. Not necessarily. It could be like an almanah who agrees to get married, who has only 30 days. Okay, so this B'rayta is ambiguous enough that Rav Huna can answer it. Second attempt, Tashema, Bogeret sheshata shenem asar chodesh. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ho'il v'chayav ba'ala bimzonoteha yafer. Bogeret, she became an adult and she waited 12 months. And so now that's it. That's the full amount of time she can wait to get married. At that point, Rabbi Eliezer says, since the husband has to provide her food from then on, he also gains the right to undo her vows. Good. That's interesting in by itself that sustenance and vows go together. But look, Ema Bogeret sheshata shenem asar chodesh. So this by itself is a question. It seems like Bogeret has 12 months to wait. So is this a challenge to Rav Huna who said only 30 days? No, we read it as saying a Bogeret and someone who waited 12 months. Either a Bogeret, who only waited 30 days, or a Ketana, who waited 12 months. In both of those two cases, since the husband has to provide sustenance for her, he can undo the vow. By splitting it into 2 cases, we're no longer talking about a Bogeret who waits 12 months, a Bogeret, or a Ketana who waits 12 months. All right, so we parried that attempt, but now the last one is going to be successful. Tashema, from a B'rayta, Hameares et betula ben sheteva'ah ba'al behi ma'akevet. Once you do kiddushin with a betula, whether he he asked her, said, okay, I'm ready to get married, that's it, and she's delaying, ben shetabahi uba'al ma'akev, or whether she says, okay, I'm ready, it's time to get married, and he is the one that's delaying, notnin la shenem asar chodesh misha'at tevi'ah, they have 12 months from the time of the request. Aval lo mishat erusin, but that's from the time of request, not from the time of kiddushin. The time of request, I assume, would be before the kiddushin. The Baraita continues, Ubagra harehi kitvu'ah. Once a girl becomes 12 and a half, it's like she already accepted a request. Even if no one asked her hand in marriage, by that time she already starts preparing, so she's considered as like pre-requested. Kesad bagra yom echad v'nitkadesha. How so? If she became 12 and a half plus 1 day, and someone asked her hand in kiddushin, and did kiddushin, notnen la shenem asar chodesh. We give her 12 months. You see here it says explicitly that after she became a bogeret, she still has 12 months. So this is a final blow to Rav Huna. It also adds la arusa sheloshim yom. For a girl who is arusa, she gets 30 days. We're going to have to explain what that means in a second, but right now we know that tiyufta de Rav Huna tiyufta. It cannot mean that once someone's a bogeret, she has only 30 days. It says right here that she has 12 months. Okay, good. Now let's explain this clause. What case is this talking about? That a woman who's arusa gets 30 days. Amar papa hachika amar. Bogeret shavru aleh shenem asar chodesh bebagrut. The first clause means that once she became a bogeret and she waited 12 months and she's now 13 and a half. And from 13 and a half on, whenever she does kiddushin, she has only 30 days. In other words, it's similar to Rav Huna, but just that you have to push it off for another year. That a girl is not preparing for marriage when she's a child, but once she's 12 and a half, she's already mentally maybe doing things to prepare for marriage, even if there's no guy asking her out. She's doing it anyway, because what else is she going to do? And therefore, once she's 13 and a half and she does kiddushin, then she only has a month because she had time to prepare. That's the end. V'larusa. So we give her 12 months. In other words, if it's before 13 and a half, she gets 12 months. But once that year of being single and an adult pass, then whenever someone does kiddushin, she gets only 1 month, not another 12 months. All right, good. Finally, we're going to explain the reason for the takana of the sages that a bride cannot get teruma while she's still in her father's house. הגיע הזמן ולא ניסו, אמר אולה דבר תורה ארוסה בת ישראל אוכלת בתרומה שנאמר וכהן כי יקנה נפש קניין כספו והנמה קניין כספו הוא. From the letter of the law of the Torah, someone who is already in arusa, even though she's a bat Yisrael and she is me'oreset to a kohen, she really could eat teruma from the time of kiddushin, since it says kohen, if he acquires a person, his acquisition, with the acquisition of his money. So this is referring to a slave, yes, but also to a wife. It's not the same at all. As a slave, he's not acquiring her in that sense, but you do kiddushin, which is a kinyan that you do with kesef. So, in some sense, it is an acquisition through the use of money, and therefore from the time of kiddushin, he is already authorized, she is under his authority, and technically can eat teruma. Matam amru ena ochelet shema yimzegu la kos bebet abiyeha betashke leachiha ula'achota. So in that case, why did the sages come later and say, no, we are not going to let her eat teruma when she's in her father's house, because maybe they'll come and they'll pour for her a drink, some wine of teruma, while she's still in her father's house. And she said, oh, you know what, I want to share with my brothers, with my brother, with my sister, who are not Kohanim and not married to Kohanim, and that will be a problem. So there's a problem of sharing her food when she's in her father's house. Good. Hold on. And if that's the true, then that should apply even after that 12 months, or whatever it is that they decided that the marriage would be. And our Mishnah said, once the 12 months is up and he is still delaying, then he can give her teruma. So, and she's still in her father's house. How come we don't worry at that point that she's going to share it with her family members? The answer is, Hatam duchta miached la. In that case, he, the husband, will designate a special place for her to eat. Since he is at that point required to give her food, and he doesn't want to feed her whole family. So he's going to say, you know what, come over here to this place and eat this terumah separately from your family. And so even though they're not living together yet, the husband and wife, and nevertheless she's not eating at home. So it's okay. If you're worried about people sharing food, then what about another case of a field worker who is a kohen? He's Jewish kohen field worker, and his boss is a Yisrael, and he's bringing his lunch to work with him. So maybe you would say he should not eat terumah, because when they take a break from working in the field, they're going to go and eat. He's going to eat his lunch in his boss's home, and there's other people around that are going to say, hey, that looks good, let me share some of that. They're going to eat. So what we should say that a field worker cannot bring terumah for lunch? No, that doesn't make sense. In the case of a field worker, he is eating from them. It's more likely that the members of the boss's family will provide lunch for the workers. Right? You never have the boss's family are going to come and take out of the lunchbox of the worker, right? That will not happen. So you don't have to worry about it. It's different from family members. There's a worker, so he can bring his terumah, and no one's gonna share his food. That's one reason. So all that is one reason of ula, that we're afraid of sharing food. Now another reason altogether why a bride who's arusa cannot eat terumah when she's in her father's house. Rav Shemuel Bar Yehuda Amar Mishum Simpon, it's because of abrogation, that the whole marriage may be retroactively annulled. If later on the husband should find a blemish in her and say, oh, you know what, you didn't tell me about this blemish, and now the whole marriage is off, and he retroactively annuls the kiddushin. Well, if in the meantime she was eating terumah, but now we find out that the kiddushin was never was valid, so she was will thereby be found to have been eating terumah as a bat Yisrael with no connection to a kohen. Therefore, we want to wait until the marriage is fully solidified after the nisuin to make sure that it won't be. Then at that point they'll have had bi'ah. He'll know if there were any blemishes. And if they're going ahead anyway with it, then we can be sure that he's not going to retroactively annul it. Okay, same question as before. If that's the reason, then after the 12 months is up for a betula, and at that point he has to give her food and he can give her terumah, why don't we worry about the same thing? They didn't have nisuin yet. Maybe he'll find a blemish and retroactively annul it. And the answer is Hatam Mivdak Badikla V'Adar Ma'ayel. Once the 12 months is up, and now he is going to have to feed her, and he is going to send a woman to check her out. So since the marriage didn't happen yet, so the nisuin didn't happen yet, so he's not checking her. But before he goes and provides sustenance for her and gives her terumah, the husband will have her checked out by trustworthy people that there's no blemish that will bother him, and only then they will do nisuin eventually whenever he's ready. So since he checked her out and there's no blemishes, or there's no blemishes he cares about, so she can start eating terumah. Ela me'ata. Okay, now another case. Eved kohen shelekacho miYisrael la lechol bitrumah mishum simpon. If you're worried about blemishes, and wouldn't that also affect a slave that a kohen acquires from a Yisrael? So once the slave is acquired, the halacha is that the slave can start eating terumah, because the slave is in the kohen's household. But why? Maybe we should wait. Maybe he should not eat la lechol from the time of acquisition, but wait till he comes in and the boss, the kohen owner, checks him out. So because maybe he'll find a blemish and he'll say, oh, this slave is no good, and return the slave, and in the meantime he had been eating terumah, even though he's going to go back and say mekach ta'ut, this slave is no good, and retroactively annul the transaction. So we answer, Simpon babadim leka, there is no blemish that would annul an acquisition of a slave. What kind of blemish are you talking about? If it's on his outside, so he sees it at the time that he's buying it. He sees if there's a blemish on his face, on his arms, he will see it. And if it's on a hidden part of his body, well, so he's buying the slave to do work. And so if it's hidden, what does he care about it? Well, it doesn't matter. It's not the same as a marriage where you care about what hidden parts look like. Nimsa ganav. Okay, what other blemishes could he worry about? That turns out he's a thief, or kub yostus higi'ah, or a gambler. Well, so that's a come to him. This is the way it is. Sometimes servants are thieves and gamblers. It's a common thing, and so this comes with the territory. You can't claim that it is a mekach ta'ut, right? It's still a binding sale. Ma'ika listim mezuyan o muhtav lemalchut. Okay, the only thing that really would be a major problem is if this slave was an armed bandit, not just a common thief, or he was signed over to the death penalty by the government, and the government's going to come take him away and execute him. So I didn't buy a slave for him to come and be taken away and executed, or he's an armed bandit. Well, in these cases, you're right. It would be a good reason to invalidate the sale, but hanu kala itlehu. But those cases, they generate publicity. Everyone will know in the town, oh, did you hear about this one? He's an armed bandit. And so he would not have bought him unknowingly. So we don't have to worry about those blemishes, and therefore we sustain the reasoning of Shmuel Bar Yehuda that in the case of marriage, it's not the same as a slave. In the case of marriage, we do worry about blemishes that may retroactively annul the kiddushin. And last point, mikadi ben lemor lo achla. According to both Ula and Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, the point is just she's not eating while she is before the nisuin. So what's the difference between them? My benaihu, another long way of saying my nafkamina. What will be a practical difference between the two reasons? Ika benaihu kibel. One is if he accepted the blemishes, he knows about the blemishes from before. At the time of Kiddushin, they revealed everything. Here's all the blemishes, and he says, fine. So then he will not be able to claim mekach ta'ut. So in that case, since he knows all the blemishes and he's accepted them, so then she could eat terumah right away, because there's no chance that it will be retroactively annulled. She could eat terumah. Whereas if the reason is because she's going to share with her family, there's still a worry that she's going to share with her family. That's nothing to do with blemishes. And on the other hand, the opposite nafkamina is masar vehalach. If the father gave over his daughter to the messengers of the husband, or he sent his messengers with her to take her to the husband's house. Now, in either of those two cases, she's already out of the father's house. She's not yet in the husband's domain, and the nisuin did not happen yet. But since she's out of the father's house, she's not going to be sharing food with the family members. And so, according to Ula, we don't have to worry about it. And she can start eating terumah as soon as she is with the messengers on the way. Whereas, if you say that we're worried about blemishes, then, well, he still didn't check out her blemishes. And so, according to that reasoning, she would not be able to eat terumah. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.